Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. My name is John Walker with Atlas RFID Solutions, and I'm here with Jeff Houtz with Fluor. Looking forward to the presentation today and talking to you guys about how ourselves with Fluor have been focusing on improving the construction productivity really by digitizing the overall construction supply chain, which is not been an easy task, but it seems to have been a very rewarding task here after we've kind of wrapped up some of our initial projects with it. So some of the things we want to talk about today are just an overview of the solution, the different components, and then wrap it up with some of the findings and value assessments from a project that we did with Fluor. So before we kind of get kicked off and get going, I do want to start with a safety topic, though. Focus on fire safety. It is winter here in North America, sort of northern hemisphere. So, one of the things that happens a lot in the winter are fires, unfortunately. Some of the things to kind of think about when it comes to fire prevention is good housekeeping. That goes for the job site as well as the home. So from a job site perspective, if you're welding, stuff like that, make sure you've got no debris around you while you're doing that. From a home perspective, make sure all your entrances and exits are clearly debris moved out of the way of in the event that you have to exit your facilities. Make sure that your smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, in your home office, job site, and also your watercraft, if you're lucky enough to be able to get out in the water in the wintertime, make sure that you have your fire extinguishers up to code on those as well. Also with any fire or with any type of emergency, you need to have a plan really, and not just think about it, but you also need to practice it and explain it to others, so other family members, other coworkers. Make sure you have a good solid plan in the event of any emergency, but for this safety topic, really around the kind of fire prevention. And unfortunately, some statistics. There's been over 1 million fires a year on average that's resulted in 15,000 injuries and 3,400 deaths. So pretty staggering statistics there, and a majority of those could be prevented by following these 4 steps that are listed on the screen there. A few other things is that less than 50% of people know how to confidently use a fire extinguisher, which is a staggering number. So we've got them around the offices, we've got them around the home, but if you don't know how to use them, then they're kind of just a big paperweight at that point. Less than 50% of the people know the correct route to exit a building or their home, which is, sometimes there needs to be multiple ways to exit depending on where the fire or the emergency is taking place. So really know your route and understand how to escape. Kind of back to the fire extinguisher topic, even if you do know how to use a fire extinguisher, it's shown that less than 25% of people actually know the location of the fire extinguisher. So you may know how to use it, but if you can't find it, that doesn't help anybody. So know how to use the fire extinguishers, know where they are around your building, and follow these steps to hopefully become more fire aware and prevent more fires. So that's our safety topic for today. So introductions, as I mentioned, my name is John Walker, Vice President of Strategic Services at Atlas. I've been around here at Atlas for about 7 years now. Previous experience has been in the field and kind of various roles within field materials management. So I'm very passionate about driving some of the efficiencies in our industry, and right now one of our main initiatives is kind of digitizing the supply chain. So excited about being here and talking more about that with you all. But I'll turn it over to Jeff at this point to introduce himself and let him run through the agenda.
Thanks, John. Will do. And thank you, everybody, for your time and participation to listen to us and hopefully do some Q&A as well about this topic. So I'm Jeff, and this is my 30th year with Fluor, most all of which in supply chain. And growing up, learning to buy things and lead teams on capital projects, used to not really know what happened to material after we bought it, which is the case with many in the EPC space and in procurement and supply chain. But through roles I've had and being shown the light, and that's not good enough to buy and forget, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Then I grew a passion really for planning and material planning and setting up job sites for success. So I'm really thrilled to have been working for the last couple of years straight, among other things, sponsoring our efforts around RFID and material readiness. So my main day jobs are two really, which is material planning for Fluor, as well as field material management oversight and sponsorship over our Jovix relationship with Atlas. So what I'll do, having given that brief intro, we're going to go through the agenda. And what we'll start off with, which is what I'll begin to kick both John and I off, is to talk a little bit about material planning itself, that function, that one day job role I have, and how that can lead to the use of RFID and auto ID technology for really having an impact on the job site and getting field material management running as smooth and as optimally as physically possible. So setting up the data for eventual use smoothly by a job site. Followed by John talking about the Jovix supplier program overview and the role suppliers, most importantly, the role that suppliers play in setting up a program like this for success. So John will cover that. Thirdly, I'll sort of take back over and lead a discussion and examples around this real world benefits on a project example that we have done, as John mentioned, together. I'll describe that project and talk about the ways that we validated the return on investment of time and money for this. And then following that, John's going to run us through, to wrap it up, some Construction Industry Institute, supplier, and other focused initiatives around this arena about material readiness. John and I serve together, sit together on a CII research team around advanced work packaging and supply chain's role in that. So happy to be doing that with John. It's really good and it hits home to my day job a lot too. So I guess a sort of a precursor, and you can go to the next slide, that I really wanted to touch on as I begin is this together, this webinar, this discussion isn't about patting ourselves on the back and what we did on this project example we'll talk about later on. It's really about advocating for better ways that the industry can do this. And we believe we've got a pretty good example of that to share. And we hope that people will get interested in and try to do some of these things as well too, because for the industry, this is an improvement. And you know, we're slow to increase our productivity in this industry, but this is an improvement. So this isn't about Fluor and this isn't about Atlas with Jovix as much as it is. It's about advocating a better way. I just wanted to sort of start with that precursor and make sure you get that this isn't just some back padding. So I wanted to start this by sort of setting up, or the work we do to enable or set up what we call this digital supply chain. And there's some themes around this, or sort of golden rules around this, that we use at Fluor to set up data right to feed this machine. And the first is have a plan. And there's lots of kinds of plans. There's Primavera project schedule plans, there's narrative plans, there's all these things. And the world I live in is about material data and the health of data, and we need a plan for that too. But planning isn't easy. Construction needs better plans, but lots of times they don't do it because it's not easy. It's hard to do a good plan. And that's a theme that we run into nearly every day, is plans could be so much better, and with a little bit more pre-work to get better plans, the outcome and the improvements that can be had, but it's not an easy task. Also true is this concept that we try to fight against all the time, like how I was trained early on, never ever just buy and forget. If our function in industry were just purchasing, I would get it. We would do transactions and that's it. Get a vendor paid, make sure something shows up, big deal. But flooding the job site with goods in no order with no plan doesn't help a soul. And just because the site says give me everything and I'll figure it out doesn't mean that's the right answer. So we have to really shy away in this space of just buying and forgetting, because somebody somewhere will need to figure that out and put all that together so that a plant actually produces product, right? So work packaging, or this concept CII calls advanced work packaging, we do have a role in. So EPC, contractor, supply chain has a role feeding the machine called work packaging. And it is about material data, getting data right. That is our role in support of work packaging, advanced work packaging. To do that, we at Fluor in this material planning space have as sort of our I don't know, precursor, our starting point is the concept of always buying everything, knowing it's tied to its work package, its construction work package, and schedule data that matters. Never ever are we supposed to ever let a buy happen with some dummy number and dummy date, not knowing and figuring it out later. No, know where that item is going to go at that job site in it's the area where the work is broken down into its work package, and get tight on knowing when. That's our role, and that's what sets up a digital, quote, digital supply chain, unquote, to be healthy, is not just about the buy and not just about when the item will show up, but about the buildability of a work package at the site. We believe that's the smart approach, and not just about purchasing, but what the customer is going to do with what you bought. So along that line, and on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about material data, which is, again, it's the language, it's the food that feeds this thing. So it's all about material data. One of those points of data is, as I mentioned, schedule data. Everybody believes they've got a schedule, but most of the time the health of that schedule or keeping up with change is not good. It's not healthy. Needs a doctor visit from time to time for sure, but we don't plan without a schedule. It doesn't exist. So it's like, it's all for naught if you don't have a schedule you actually believe in. So staying ahead of schedule data is crucial. Without it, half the project doesn't even need to be there, because you're just winging it and hoping for the best. So too is the delivery, logistics or estimated time of arrival, the delivery data that something is tied to also. And where we go wrong on this is lots of times summarizing complete POs, delivery dates, or not keeping up with the details. You think everything might be coming at one time on one truck, but we know better, and it's actually at 20 times on 50 trucks. So keeping up with that detail also feeds the machine, right? And knowing which work package that something will eventually be in is key to everything. Then it becomes about the entire supply chain, and not just about purchasing, knowing where it's going in the plan. So forecasting ahead of time, even from the home office before construction even really gets going, forecasting whether material will be a work package's constraint. So that's really important too, and many didn't think of that. I didn't think of that for years until I sort of was shown the light. Is there's a lot of constraints a work package can have. It can be craft availability, it can be safety and quality sign-offs, it can be all kinds of stuff. But material needs to be really known, because it's the thing that most people think about, is material being late or not. We need to be able to forecast accurately whether material really is or is not the problem for work packages. The others, like quantities and attributes, the technical quantities and attributes and specifications, tagging and marking data, if we got that right, and interim receiving locations, and modular fabrication for items we bought that don't go to the job site, that go somewhere else first. All of that is about material data. So having said that, and to the next slide, what does it all mean? Back to this definition, right? So we put this definition up here, focusing on simply one thing: the turning of document-centric activities to data-centric activities, making paper turn into accurate electronic data, not just data, but accurate, full-on real and right data. And if we can do that, we really have transformed something. We've transformed manual to automatic in many ways. So on the next slide, we begin to show some brief little pictures, because pictures are worth 1,000 words, much better than PowerPoint bullets, right? So look at a packing list example. and look at all these binder clip stacks of all of this receiving paperwork, and picture this poor, we'll call this person a warehouse clerk or warehouse material planner or whatever, but the concept and why I like the picture is so funny, because look at how high the stack is. Look at how much work there is to do that's manual keystroke, right? And so if we could finally have an impact on getting rid of foots high inboxes, the impact we could have to many things. Accuracy, certainly. Timeliness, of course. But that's what this digital supply chain can be. So on the slide you see now, this is designed to sort of show in a picture the start of going to a digital supply chain. So if information then could be made better, like the workface planners questions and needs around, hey, is that little tiny manual valve here like it says it's here? That's part of my package. Do you think I can release this package? The buyer checking to make sure that everything's received, the engineering making sure that everything was showed up without any kind of question by quality. All of those things begin to be shared, and somehow we then begin to centralize more than just buy and forget. And then, is there one more slide? We may have gone, there we go, thank you, sorry. Getting too fancy for my simple mind. What this then is designed to show, with a Jovix app in the center and this electronic logos showing what if we could actually automatically, with much more speed and much more accuracy, feed back and forth, because you can see the arrows go both ways, feed back and forth from a place where all of that can be found, right? Anybody's purchasing system data, but if we're really feeding the customer with buildability of work packages, all of the data that we need to do to make sure that we're feeding construction accurate and timely buildability data, finally we can be there, because most of this can be made automatic. And I know those are just words, but it's actually true, and we're going to show some examples of savings gotten from having done this on more than one project, but there is one spotlight we'd like to shine on one. So the next slide sort of puts it in some perspective when you add geography into the mix, because as you all know, if there was one client, one job site, one contractor, boy, would life be easy. But projects don't work that way anymore, or these days. At least most of our projects don't, because if a supplier is in one place that's a long way from those goods' first point of receipt, which could be at a fabricator, call it a pipe fabricator like that graphic, well, and of course that's got to be moved somewhere else too, or even put together with some module being done at a module fabricator, and then there's an interim receiving at some port, and where is my thing, and is it even in the right order to feed construction sequence? Well, so many more variables because of geography happen, especially when things like modularization happen, and big skidded units and modules and the ship loose material caused by that showing up at a site in a container that nobody knows anything about. We have to do better than that. And we believe that it starts not halfway through the process and not during the logistics cycle, or certainly not after it's received at a job site, but it starts at suppliers, integrating suppliers into the plan. And like the graphic shows up by number 1 in supplier, getting things identified and associated and tagged and tracked at the supplier before any of those other things happen has shown real benefit to us. And we're going to talk more about that, and John will lead us through that too, but we believe that's where it starts. So defining, in terms of keys to success, having a plan, as in defining a strategy, not just an idea, but a written strategy, setting accurate expectations, measurable expectations. And importantly, number 3, right, is ensure that the expectations are clearly defined and exactly what you're going to need your suppliers to do and exactly what you're going to need your logistics firm, your forwarder to do, etc. Monitoring it, and this too is not rocket science, but making sure that what we told them they must do and they agreed to do, they're actually doing. And lastly, this concept of needing someone to run circles and keep track of the data side of this too. It's like a supply chain workplace planner. It's an interesting concept, but it's like supply chain keeping track of data's health and setting up the site for success. That's a key to supply chain success in feeding this machine that we call digital supply chain. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John to talk about the components of the program from their side, and we'll get back to my other part in just a few minutes.
Thanks, Jeff. That was a great overview. So yeah, I want to focus on the digital supply chain and what that means from a component side of things. So I'm going to focus on kind of 3 cliche things, if you will. Number 1, the process. Jeff alluded to some of the variables that we're looking at when trying to define and create this digital supply chain. So I want to talk about the process that was put in place to help kind of form this this mentality and execution strategy of a digital supply chain. Then obviously there's a technology component to it that I'll go through. And then lastly, from a managing the overall digital supply chain, talk about some of the characteristics of the people that we see helping manage this overall solution. So I'll talk a little bit about the people that are involved in the digital supply chain effort. So if I take a look at really the key fundamentals of a supplier engagement process, number 1 is, as Jeff alluded to, develop it as a program. Start the strategy early. Don't wait until after your RFPs have been set out to vendors. Embed the language that makes sense and set clear expectations early with those suppliers, fabricators, vendors, whatever you're referring to them as. Making sure that those expectations are clearly outlined before they actually bid on the job or bid on the work or provide the goods to you. Make sure that language is embedded so they clearly understand and how to participate in the digital supply chain program. The third piece is really important, and that's the training and onboarding aspect. So, we're creating kind of a new concept in this world. We've always asked for suppliers to provide documentation, whether it's vendor data, advanced shipping notices, or some other form of documentation. But what we're really trying to shift to is vendors providing more accurate data that can then get integrated into various work planning tools that we have during our project execution. So really being able to train and onboard suppliers in a scalable way to allow them to understand the kind of new requests that we're having of them for the data side of things. It's got to be scalable. So back when we first started, we really focused on getting upstream with fabricators, with pipe spool fabricators, structural steel fabricators, which realistically was pretty easy to do with boots on the ground. Now we're tackling this full project supplier list where there could be 100, 200 suppliers in some of these larger projects where boots on the ground does not become feasible. So you have to have a scalable training platform, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. You have to be able to provide durable and affordable hardware. You have to have an application that allows for multiple people to have access to. I can't go send tablets to every single vendor. I need to have an application that can be downloaded through some of the consumer stores that are available on your iPhone or Android to be able to create these digital packing lists and log in. Then you have to have the hardware, such as the RFID tags that you send to them, to be durable to withstand the shipping of international shipments, banging around with a sea can, whatever it needs to be. So it needs to be affordable, but also durable to withstand some of the conditions that we work in. And finally, one of the fifth things is looking at a cloud-based software solution on the consumer devices. So, it doesn't need to be an on-prem type solution. It needs to be cloud-based so that multiple different entities can have access to it and share information that is required for project execution. Jeff alluded to it, I alluded to it. You need to empower a digital supply chain coordinator. This is really a key focus on overall health of the program, whether it be communicating with some of the suppliers or ensuring that all the assets are being digitally captured properly, just making sure the overall health of the supplier engagement process is on track and what was set forth in the contract language is key to empower an individual to help manage that process. If we take a look at the supplier onboarding process, and I'm going to play a video in a second that describes it a little bit better, but if I look at this busy process flow here, there's really 4 swim lanes, if you will, as well as 3 different, vertical markets that you can go across here from interaction that we provide to the program, from the Jovix swim lanes to project procurement to suppliers. It really starts at project procurement. It's including those terms and conditions into the RFQs and RFPs and making sure that they're, in the contract language to the suppliers. Once that's been awarded to that supplier, having the supplier go into a cloud-based application and get registered and start ordering the necessary tags that are required to put on all of the materials that are shipping to your job site, whether those are RFID tags, whether they're barcodes, or whether they're simply just downloading the template that's necessary to create this digital packing list mentality. It's really that onboarding process is super key. And then I mentioned the training aspect. It's got to be scalable. So it has to have the ability to log in and take a learning management system such as our training station, which I'll show a video of here in a second, that allows for a scalable training solution for the vendors. And then the tag logistics. We've got to be able to get the RFID tags out to the vendors in a timely manner so that they can apply the tags prior to shipment of these items to the job sites or the other project entities along the supply chain. So it's really important for this process. So what I'm going to do is play a quick video here that shows an overview of our solution from a supplier onboarding perspective. So this is the platform that we rolled out in order to accomplish some of the scalable requirements for bringing suppliers on board into a digital supply chain. So I'm going to switch this over and play a video here, and I will maximize it and then play the video.
The Jovix Customer Success Team manages your supplier onboarding process from beginning to end with a proven system that ensures suppliers are ready to go on day 1. The process begins by submitting a request for training using the custom supplier support request form online. Suppliers are emailed a link to a simple form that, once submitted, notifies team members who take it from there. Supplier training is hosted in our own Jovix Train Station, a modern learning management system that houses hundreds of hours of interactive content covering all things Jovix. Users are quickly enrolled in the Train Station program so they can get right to work. The system is available 24/7 and offers one-size-fits-all training as well as custom solutions tailored to your site's specific processes. Custom supplier training is tailored to your specific processes and answers the who, what, when, why, where, and most importantly, the how of upstream tagging for your project. With custom reports and dashboards in the train station, project representatives can stay up to date on the progress of your supplier training program. In addition to project-specific training, users can easily navigate to the course catalog and enroll in any additional courses they choose, enhancing their knowledge of Jovix. Our rewards system even allows users to earn free t-shirts, hats, and other gear simply by logging in and learning. After completing the training, suppliers are then directed back to their custom supplier support request form to order tags. Once the tags are received, suppliers can begin the upstream tagging process in the shop and in Jovix. Your customer success team works with you and your suppliers to design the simplest and most effective tagging strategy to ensure maximum visibility. With our mobile app, for example, suppliers get a streamlined workflow that gives them the tools they need to quickly tag their materials and get back to building the materials you need. With Jovix Insights, you can see a real-time view of your supplier tagging efforts and identify possible bottlenecks in receiving and warehousing. And the best part? Your Jovix representatives monitor the entire process. If any issues arise, suppliers can use the supplier support request form to contact the customer success team and get their issue resolved in a timely manner. With our proven supplier onboarding and support program, you'll enjoy the peace of mind and productivity gained through upstream supplier tagging.
All right, so that was an overview of the solution that we rolled out for having a scalable training platform. So I do want to talk a little bit about the typical sample timeline that we see here. There's really kind of 3 phases to it, and I've covered a little bit of this during the process flow. The video covered a little bit of it, so I won't spend too much time on it. But the first phase is contracting, and one of the things at the end of contracting that we need to make a determination of that we work with the clients to do is establish KPI measurements. So to ensure that the suppliers are tagging properly, there's no erroneous data coming into the system. So we developed the KPIs early for client-specific things they want to track regarding performance of supplier participation in a digital supply chain program. So we established these KPIs up front and then track those in the Insights program that you saw there to ensure that there is compliance of the program. And the other piece is really kind of the supplier onboarding piece that's focused on training. But Jeff alluded to the compliance monitoring when he was going through some of the keys to success. So this operational performance, readiness, and making sure that everybody is performing properly is a key component that we do throughout the entire project lifecycle, ensuring that the suppliers are participating, the data is properly flowing, and that there are no issues from a tagging perspective and identification during the creation of these digital packing lists. That's a key component of the system there. So that was a little bit on the process side of things. So obviously I want to spend some time to talk about the software that helps enable the program. So, first off, there needs to be some key functional aspects of the software that allows for suppliers to create digital packing lists. So some of those software capabilities are, obviously you need to have the ability to auto ID materials. So, we obviously utilize various types of RFID as well as barcodes. So the solution needs to be able to, have the capabilities to auto ID materials. You also have to have the ability to containerize goods. So not all goods ship on the back of a flat deck or, laid singly in a sea can. There's oftentimes nested components. So I may have a pallet with a box on it inside of a sea can. And I need to see those levels to ensure I understand how those materials are coming to me. I mean, that's the essence of a digital packing list. It's not only show me what's coming, but how is it arranged in the shipment that helps my guys offload it in the field. So containerizing is a key component. Statusing materials throughout the supply chain. Materials may make more than one stop throughout their life before it gets to the project site. You may have a port stop that gets some break bulk shipments that get put onto another type of vessel or another type of vehicle. So you need to have the ability to break these items up and show how they're being statused throughout the supply chain. So, when an item hits a port, show that it's arrived at a port. When it's a marshaling yard, show it's arrived at a marshaling yard. And the statusing can be manually based. It could be scanned through, an iPhone camera, or it could use gate readers, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. But statusing the materials is key. And then having a system that allows for data to be shared. Gone are the days where there's one tool that's used for project execution. Large projects that we execute, there could be 10, 20 different systems that all need to share data amongst themselves. So the tool needs to have the ability either to integrate or easily move data in and out of it to share with other systems in the technology stack for the project execution. Key component is linking all of your assets back to a work plan or a work package. So being able to understand all of the components and all the makeup of those materials that are related to an individual IWP or higher level CWP, being able to understand where all those items fit into the actual constructability that's going to be needed. And then obviously the tool needs to have the ability to segregate supplier data. As I mentioned, we're not dealing with 1, 2, 3 fabricators. We're dealing with hundreds of suppliers. And so we need to have the ability to break the data down in a way that supplier A doesn't see supplier B's data, vice versa. So there needs to be some segregation of supplier data information within the tool set as well. So those are really key components from a software perspective that the solution needs to have to create this digital supply chain. So in addition to the software, there's obviously a hardware component as well. One of the things that we saw early on is that when there is a requirement to physically tag items, whether it be barcode or RFID tag, it puts more ownership on the suppliers to make sure that the data is right. So if I want to put an RFID tag on something, the data needs to exist, or I need to create the ability for that data to exist. So having that as a contractual requirement now allows for more suppliers to identify assets digitally prior to them coming to site. So that's just been a basic function we've seen by rolling this out. And you've heard me refer to Auto ID a few times throughout this, but I'll explain a little bit what that is. So Auto ID is essentially any type of identification technology that allows for automatic identification of assets throughout the throughout the lifespan of that supply chain, whether it be used during receiving, picking, or issuing, or any of the other field materials management transactions. The Auto ID kind of helps you reference back to that piece mark of that ID of that item. And that could come in the form of a barcode, which many of you may have sitting around on your desk right now, looking at the back of a water bottle with an ID card or something. There's also active RFID, which is this orange tag you see up here. It looks like a candy bar. And then we, as of late, have really been focused on passive RFID technology, which is a lower price point RFID tag, which has allowed for us to cover more items from a tagging perspective. It's not really that cost prohibitive to tag a majority of your items with passive RFID tags because they're obviously sub-dollar. They're down to 50 cents, 75 cents type tag depending on what you get. So it's really allowed us to tag more items in the project. Obviously, you have to have mobile devices. And with mobile devices, it's one thing to have the software run on the mobile device, which is great. And, everybody's got an iPhone, everybody's got an Android that's out there. But also being able to tap into the internal peripherals of that device so you don't look like Inspector Gadget out there with 35 different types of readers on you. So we want to try and use as much of the integrated system of the devices as we can, such as using the camera as a barcode scanner or using the GPS built into the phone to be able to track and understand where you're at in relation to materials. So really trying to integrate those devices as well as be able to use the software on the various operating systems. The next component, which I alluded to from a statusing side of things, is the gate readers. We've used gate readers throughout to status items, and this could be at a port, it could be at an exit of a fabricator's facility, or it could be at your job site to alert you when goods arrive. So these are some of the various hardwares that we've seen implemented throughout the digital supply chain process. So, lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the people that we've seen, help benefit, drive the digital supply chain concept. So, in short, one of the things to think about is that with this digital supply chain concept and Jeff's comments about not buying and forgetting, we're putting more ownership on, say, expediters or material coordinators or, buyers to make sure that the data and the information is correct and how it all links back to a work plan. The role of a digital supply chain coordinator is almost like a supply chain workplace planner. They are tied in, tightly with your AWP champions or your workplace planners on site from a supply chain perspective, right? So they're the go-to individuals for knowing where things are at as it relates back to an individual scope of work. So, really this role bridges the gap between procurement and construction. As I've alluded to, it's really not a best practice to offload all of this extra work onto a buyer or an expediter. So there could be some opportunities for the digital supply chain coordinator to appear in some of the larger projects that we deal with. So those are some of the themes that we've seen and some of the components of the system from a process, technology, down to the people side of things. So, with that being said, I'm going to kick it back over to Jeff to talk a little bit about a project in which they've rolled out the digital supply chain concept on. So, Jeff, take it away from there.
Thank you. It's a good point, John, about sort of changing the face of this work as this becomes into the modern age. Is this digital supply chain coordinator role? We hope that the traditional warehouse person, field material management person, becomes so fed with knowledge of this technology and the benefits that their work is feeding to others, that modernizes that job a lot. There's still a lot of hands-on, we all get it, but it modernizes the job. So, and it's a good segue to this project case study because we believe we've built some of those people on this project, which is great. We just need to now make more of them. So I'm just going to set this up and introduce this project in a case study we did in a lot of ways to prove out the return on investment of time and money on this project, and something that happened last last spring, just a few months back now, I guess, or more than a few months, but where John actually participated in a study at the job site, which is in the Middle East, a large project, oil and gas project that we had undertaken there in the Middle East, major module fabrication in Asia, work share on engineering and procurement, major undertaking. So this project is still going on. I thought I'd mention that too. Still going on and getting a little bit closer to its completion, but still a years-long endeavor. So we worked with over 175 suppliers to get them onboarded and trained and contracted with them, including provisions in their orders that they would do what we asked them to do to set up the start of the digital supply chain. So onboarded them with training, hardware, software, tags, and did the tagging and the association for setting up this project for eventual success. What's on the screen right now is one of the pipe fabricators, major pipe fabricator, doing spool tagging and RFID tag association for spools, and again, not the largest of spools at all, what you see in the picture, but they will eventually have made their way to the Middle East and put together in some form or fashion. So that's the number of suppliers that we set up for success. And the upfront work in setting up the suppliers, as both of us have already mentioned, is critical to everything, and not waiting until everything shows up at the site to begin. And John's got an example of that in just a minute. So I think there might be video, John, or was that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to pop up a video here and play that before we kind of show some of the benefits here. So I'll switch over and fire that up.
Perfect, thanks.
When you utilize the digital supply chain through the Jovix Supplier Program, you allow your suppliers to share pertinent and itemized data about an asset and its components upstream, benefiting all those involved along the project lifecycle. Without this upstream visibility, you expose your project to the risk of major disruptions from unmanaged, ship-loose components, plus siloed and often inconsistent data that is either late or forgotten altogether. Take the case of this pump skid. When the procurement team requisitions the pump from the vendor, all the procurement team sees is a single line item for the pump, 201P001, in the company's procurement system. In reality, the pump is made up of over 50 components that will be shipped separately and assembled on site. The vendor often provides pertinent information throughout the process, which is often referred to as vendor data. In addition to vendor data, information is provided in the form of advanced shipping notices or packaging lists to project expediting. The problem occurs when this information is very document-centric, siloed, and oftentimes left out of the procurement or the materials management system and work planning tools on the project site. Upon delivery of pump 201P001 to the job site, the material arrives in separate crates. The receiving team checks the paper packing list attached to each crate against the physical material and brings the marked up packing lists, often dirty, hard to read, and error-prone, back to a warehouse data clerk. The one-line item of pump skid 201P001 is received within the procurement system. The additional ship-loose items are often overlooked or never entered back into the system for detailed tracking of the individual components. This creates an unmanaged ship-loose scenario and can lead to many problems downstream for the project team. In the event that the project team enters this information manually back into the system, the process is an extremely inefficient use of site resources. With the Jovix Supplier Program, suppliers create a digital packing list at the source of the information, identifying all components that are shipping prior to arrival, eliminating the confusion and need for manual entry downstream. The information is created in a data-centric format as opposed to a document-centric format. This data easily augments existing records within procurement or material management systems and can be shared throughout the project team's work planning systems. In addition, the Jovix digital packing list functionality removes data entry from the project site and places the ownership back in the hands of the supplier. This improves a project's ability to understand the way in which materials are arriving at the job site, affording better understanding of the supply chain and how that translates into constructability.
Thanks for that, John. And before you sort of take over with some examples of data and time trials, I just thought I'd add that it makes me smile when I see that video again, because it's such a classic when those two guys are walking around all these crates and lay down space, scratching their heads like, where the heck is what I'm looking for? That's why we're doing what we're doing. And as John can talk about proof of that in this return on investment, we studied that and studied just how much time can be saved and what that translates to in terms of dollars, et cetera. And that's a good segue, I guess, John, for you to start on that. You there, John? John Walker.
Hey, can you hear me, Jeff?
Now we can, thank you.
Sorry, I was working through a new system here and kind of got a little sidetracked. So I'm going to go back and share my screen. I've got a couple of slides here to show. Just give me 1 second. So can you see my slides, Jeff, just to confirm? Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Not slide. I can see the sort of the cover intro to this webinar.
Okay, great. Well, I will. I'm working through that right now. Just saying I can't share for some reason. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we saw from the trip that we took out there. So in February, we mobilized to the Middle East to a project with Fluor, and we're able to kind of spend, I think it was about 9 to 10 days with several representatives from our side as well as from the Fluor side. And we were able to kind of do some observations and broke down a value assessment that really encompassed 4 key components. Number one, the first component was related to transactional efficiencies. And then those transactional efficiencies are typically some of the easier ones to capture value against. So, for example, the first real one we looked at was, and I'm trying to get my slides back here so you guys can see the graphic, was focused on the receiving side of things. So during our time at the project site, we were able to shadow and look at 53 different receipts of materials being delivered. And over that, we were able to see a 31% efficiency gained from traditional pen and paper. So when we look at transactional efficiencies and how it relates to the tool that we were using out there for items that were coming pre-tagged to the job site, you know, we were able to see some big time similarities as well as some efficiencies gained. So, you know, the time to collect the truck paperwork, you're still going to have to do that in this day and age. We still need to sign off on the bill of lading and so forth to take care custody control from the transportation company. We still had to unload the trucks. Unfortunately, we don't have software that can really help that. But when it came to checking against, packing lists, we were able to scan the items rather than flipping through a large packing list to circle the items and so forth. And as well as when you start getting down in here to entering the MRR data into the ERP tool that was used on site, you know, that was eliminated because we did that at point of receipt. So the transactional efficiency that we saw, you know, related to the receiving side of things was, you know, over 13,000 hours that was extrapolated out over the project life, how many MRRs have been done of that. So when you start focusing on the transactional efficiency, it's kind of pretty easy to start seeing the value and the benefits. Some of the other things that we looked at related to the value assessment were 3 other components. Number one, it was, you know, taking a look at comparative experience events. So what that means is analysis of non-transactional material management efficiency. And we did this by rolling out a number of surveys, over 100 different surveys of various contractors and field materials management staff on the project site to understand how this project, with this digital supply chain concept, related to past projects they've been on. And it was pretty staggering seeing a lot of the time that folks had spent on other projects. You know, the average time, I think they have 10 years experience or something like that. So it's weren't all newbies that were answering those. They had many projects, 2, 3, 4 mega projects under their belt. And some of the, you know, interesting things, we saw a 55 increase in efficiencies compared to past projects as it relates to, you know, identifying assets when they came to the job site. So, you know, the concept of the ship loose material showing up with the pump, like what is this widget, what is that widget, that was, you know, dramatically reduced in terms of the disadvantages of trying to find out what that material related to. Some other things that we looked at were, you know, project observation use cases. So as we're out there shadowing, we're able to take down things that we saw in conjunction with Fluor that, you know, wasn't really identified as a value add at the beginning of the project, but as the tool became more an integral part of the project execution, added a lot of value. And, you know, one of those examples that we saw was really kind of this digitization of the request and pick and issue process. And so I don't mean actually being able to go out and find the item faster with RFID, which is a, you know, benefit that's been widely documented through various studies. I'm talking about the process of allowing contractors to see the progress against their request for materials in a cloud-based solution. So we were able to see dashboards set up with the contractors and in the warehouse office trailer that showed all the outstanding MWRs and the progress against those as items were being picked. This is a, you know, a really big win for the project side. This is a very manual collection effort prior to rolling out a solution like Jovix. And then lastly, you know, we took a look at kind of a construction cost avoidance. And two areas that we really focused on for this was related to piping material and steel piece marks, and they both were kind of different. So there are multiple contractors, mechanical contractors on this job that, you know, this fabricator was servicing, and, you know, the dreaded mixed loads still took place. We tried to mitigate those as much as possible with early intervention, but, you know, lesson learned, we may not have been as early as we should have been from an interaction with the fabricator side of things. So there were still mixed loads that were coming out. When I say mixed loads, there were spools for contractor A and B in a single C can. You know, it's always been a pain. Do I shake it out in the warehouse or I shake it out at the work front? So elected to shake it out at the work front, but with digitally identifying those assets, able to quickly sweep and pull those spools back into the materials management, care custom control, and release those once that scope of work was needed. So that really helped with kind of this constraint management of the items. The next piece was related to the steel mark pieces. So, you know, a lot of the steel showed up on site prior to Jovix being deployed. So once again, that timeliness side of things. But we were able to go out and utilize the supplier's barcodes that were in place for tracking spools tracking the steel piece marks internally, and quickly capture the GPS location of all those assets by scanning with the mobile app. And that kind of did a very quick reconciliation of all of the steel on site, which would have taken, you know, hours and hours of time and multiple different people keying in information in the system to do that manually. So those are two things that we know would have had a major impact on construction if not had been mitigated from a tool and kind of this digital supply chain process. So at the end of the day, you know, estimated savings across all four of those value streams was around $4 to $6 million of cost avoidances. So, you know, the interesting and the most telling piece of this is these savings were not seen up in, you know, Canada where the market is, you know, very high in terms of hourly labor rate. This was seen down in, you know, in the Middle East where there's typically a lower cost of labor at that point. So, you know, we saw like I said, a cost avoidance of around $4 to $6 million out there. So, with that being said, I'll kind of turn it over to Jeff to talk around some of the benefits at a higher level that they've experienced with this digital supply chain concept.
Thanks for that. Yeah, very, very good point. This is a sort of a summary, but I will add that we meant and did need for not just Fluor supply chain and not just Atlas RFID solutions and Jovix personnel to validate this. We knew long-term we would need third-party validation of these return on investment and these time and money savings. And so this was the result of project personnel, client personnel, construction personnel, and not just our own people, because we knew that would be challenged, and it was challenged. but helped us to get over the hurdle and go enterprise agreement on this as our field material management system, much more optimized than just our own reference system. So I want to throw that out there as a way of summarizing this, and due to time, the words on the screen that really matter, I think, are proactive. It's the things that people can expect when trying to do this, right? Proactive management, reduced hours, and increased visibility and accuracy, right? So we can, when you fully roll out a program like this, because you can't just bits and pieces something, especially on a really large project. If you go all in, like the example we've shown, and try to do the whole thing, it actually works, and it actually adds up to better savings than we even really expected. So those are the things that we can expect. And then on the next slide, sort of the lessons that we learned included sort of a re-emphasis on data quality and timeliness. That will surprise no one on this call, but we did learn that the healthier the data, the better the savings. Certainly the need for early and strong cross-functional engagement, and nobody on the call will be surprised by that either, but we were reminded over and over about that and making sure we don't do this in a bubble. And then of course too, that in ownership and oversight is really important. And I guess I'll end my comments with this, is this will not do itself. Strong, complete ownership and oversight over the implementation of this work process is crucial. It will not do itself. Just like how data won't integrate itself across systems, neither will this program do it by itself. Still takes the hard work of leadership driving this, and when you do, good things can happen. So turn it over to you, John, to talk about how this relates to CII work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. Just in summary here, I appreciate everybody's time today going through this, and this is obviously on our mind, Fluor, Atlas, and our other clients as well as this digital supply chain concept. But there's a lot of eyes in the industry on this, and CII is a very well-known group that tries to document and improve efficiencies, and they do it very well within the industry. And there's several teams right now focused on supply chain efficiency gain, which is the next big frontier, I think, of productivity step change in our industry, is really digging in and helping make the supply chain more efficient. But research team RT 344 read out last year the annual conference, and the one that Jeff was alluding to that we both sit on, and several folks that are on the call here, I think today are participating in that as well, is research team 363. We read out in summer 2020, so we're looking at how suppliers integrate to the overall AWP plan. So pretty pumped about reading that out. There's a couple other teams that are out there within CII. It's a digital threads team for AWP. So really defining the data standard for fueling AWP programs with supply chain information. So that team is heavily focused on kind of the data aspect of supply chain. And there's a really interesting one that's popped up here over the past, 6 months. It's the interoperability subcommittee that's really focused on, once we identify the data and we get everybody on board, how do we easily move the data between systems? So the interoperability subcommittee is really taking charge and helping drive some of the data movement aspects of the equation. So, with that being said, I apologize we ran a little bit late, but there is a question and answer panel, really I guess it would be a question panel for you guys to enter your questions as you need to on the computer, and then you'll be able to, we'll be able to respond back to those via email to you. I don't think we're going to have enough time to take questions and answers today because we are up against the hour here, but put your questions in the question pane over there, and also if you have any questions, our contact information is up on the screen here, Jeff and myself. I want to thank everybody for participating today and allowing us to present this content to you all. It's a passion of ours here at Atlas, as well as Jeff and his company as well with Fluor, and so we really appreciate the time, and thanks, and we'll see y'all later.